I was in the garage when my daughter-in-law walked past the door and I caught the look on her face. Not at me, at the workbench, at the old metal toolbox sitting open on the corner shelf, the one my father left me, the one I've had for 41 years. She glanced at it for maybe 2 seconds, then looked away too fast. Smiled at me like nothing happened. That was the moment, though I didn't know it yet. My name doesn't matter much to this story. What matters is that I'm 63 years old. I spent 32 years as a licensed CPA and forensic accountant before I retired, and I've spent most of my life believing that family is the one thing you can count on when everything else falls apart. I believed it right up until last spring when I learned that sometimes the people sitting at your dinner table are the ones drawing up the plans to take everything from you. My son Gilbert is 31. He married Tessa 6 years ago, and for most of those 6 years, I thought she was good for him. She settled him down. He'd been drifting, different jobs, different cities, never quite landing anywhere. After they got married and moved back to Clarksburg, West Virginia, I let them move into the guest apartment above my garage, rent-free. I told myself it was temporary, just until Gilbert got back on his feet. That was 4 years ago. I don't say this with bitterness. I want to be clear about that. At the time, I was genuinely glad to have them close. My wife, Donna, passed 8 years ago, pancreatic cancer, 3 months from diagnosis to gone, and the house felt too large and too quiet after that. Having Gilbert nearby filled something that I hadn't known how to fill on my own. But something shifted about 2 years in. Gilbert stopped looking for steady work. Tessa picked up more hours at the nail salon where she worked, and I noticed the resentment creeping into her voice when she talked about it. Gilbert started sleeping late, started spending more time online, started having conversations with Tessa in the apartment that went quiet the moment I came up the outside stairs to knock. I noticed. That's the thing. People assume that because a man is past 60 and lives quietly, he's stopped paying attention. I never stopped paying attention. 32 years of forensic accounting teaches you to see the things that don't add up. Last February, Gilbert came to me with a proposition. He said he and Tessa had been looking at a food truck business. He'd done the research, had a vendor lined up, had a location in mind near the university. He needed $40,000 to get started. He sat at my kitchen table with a folder of printed papers, menus, cost projections, a supposed lease agreement, and he was so confident, so polished, that for a moment I almost didn't notice that the numbers didn't track. I told him I'd look it over and let him know. That night I went through the folder. The lease agreement was a generic template you could download from any legal website. The cost projections assumed a profit margin that no food operation in this country sustains in year 1. The vendor name didn't appear in any business registry I could find. I've spent 3 decades finding exactly this kind of constructed fiction in corporate audit trails. Seeing it in my own son's handwriting was something else entirely. I told him no. Not yet, I said. Let me help you build this out more carefully. Let's get a real business attorney involved. He was quiet for a few days after that. Then he started being friendly again, almost aggressively friendly, offering to help with yard work, asking if I wanted to watch the game. Tessa started bringing me plates of food, my favorite, pot roast, twice in 1 week. I accepted it all. I didn't say what I was thinking. I kept watching. Then came the Saturday morning with the toolbox. I was replacing a faucet washer in the garage utility sink. Toolbox open on the shelf the way it always is when I'm working. Gilbert came in to say he was heading to his buddy's place to help move some furniture. He poked around the shelves for a few minutes, said he was looking for a level. I found it for him. He left. 10 minutes later, Tessa came through on her way to the car, glanced at the toolbox, and that was the look. Quick, checking. Like she expected something to be different. I set down the faucet parts and walked to the bench. I didn't find anything right away. The toolbox has 3 trays and a deep compartment on the bottom. Everything looked as it always does. Wrenches sorted by size, tape measure on the left, the small red flashlight I've carried since 1987. I almost talked myself out of it. Then I lifted out the second tray. Underneath, sitting in the corner of the deep compartment, was a folded envelope, unsealed. Inside was a piece of paper with my signature on it, or something that was meant to look like my signature. It was a notarized, or what appeared to be a notarized, personal loan agreement, dated 3 weeks prior, showing that I had agreed to lend Gilbert and Tessa $40,000, secured against nothing with no repayment schedule. My signature at the bottom, a notary stamp that looked professional from a distance, and a line for a witness signature that was blank. I stood there in my garage for a long time. I am not a man who cries easily. I cried that morning. Not loudly, not for long. Just the kind of quiet that happens when you understand something you can't ununderstand. My son had tried to plant a forged document in my toolbox. I didn't know yet exactly what he intended to do with it, but I knew enough. $40,000. My signature. A document that could be used to claim I'd already agreed to a loan, one that could potentially be argued against my estate, or used to pressure me, or presented to someone else as proof of a financial commitment I'd never made. I photographed the document from every angle. I photographed the envelope, the notary stamp, the toolbox, the position of the tray. Then I put everything back exactly as I'd found it. I spent the rest of the day being completely normal. I finished the faucet repair. I ate lunch. I watched a Cardinals game. When Gilbert came home in the evening, I asked how the furniture moving went. He said, "Fine." I said, "Good." We stood in the driveway for a few minutes talking about whether it was going to rain. He never looked at the garage. That night, I called my attorney, a woman named, well, let's just say she's been handling my affairs for 20 years, and she did not mince words when I told her what I'd found. She said I needed to move carefully. A forged document isn't useful to someone until they try to use it. We needed to know what the plan was before we responded. She also connected me with a contact she had at the county assessor's office and suggested I check whether anything had been filed or attempted in my name. I spent the next 2 weeks doing what I do. Quietly, methodically, I started looking at the financial picture around my son and his wife. What I found was worse than I expected. Gilbert had 3 credit cards I didn't know about. 2 of them showed cash advances from ATMs near our house. One of the ATMs was less than a mile from a local dealer who'd had 2 prior drug arrests, both for methamphetamine. The amounts were small at first, $40, $60, then climbing. Over 14 months, Gilbert had moved just under $9,000 through those cards. I thought about the weight he'd lost, the way he slept until noon, the grandiose business plan with the impossible numbers, the sudden charm offensive after I said no. I thought about a lot of things I hadn't wanted to think before. I reached out quietly to someone I'd known for years, a retired detective named Horace, who now does private investigation work, and gave him what I had. Within a week, he confirmed what I already suspected. Gilbert was using, Tessa knew, and the plan, as best Horace could piece together, was that the forged loan agreement would be presented not to pressure me directly, but to a third party, a hard money lender who'd been approached about a loan, using the document as proof of collateral and family backing. $40,000 in fake documentation to secure a larger cash loan, which would fund their next move. Whatever that move was, my attorney and I talked it through. She was direct. Once that document was presented to a lender, that was wire fraud. Federal territory. What Gilbert had done by creating it was already forgery under state law. And me, if I walked in and confronted him right now, the document would disappear and we'd have nothing. The stamp, she believed, was fake, but convincing enough to cause real trouble. I want to stop here and tell you something about being a father at this point in a situation like this. There is a version of you that wants to walk up those stairs and knock on that door and say, "I know what you did and I love you and please let me help you get clean and we'll figure this out together." That version of me was very loud for about 3 days. I've lost my wife. I'm not young. The idea of losing my son too. Not to death, but to a prison sentence, or to drugs, or to both. That sits in you differently when you're 63 than it might at 40. But I also knew this. If I did that, and he wasn't ready to hear it, and the document disappeared and the plan pivoted to something else, I might not catch it next time, and the time after that, I might be the one who didn't see it coming. I did not walk up those stairs. Instead, I called the bank where I had my accounts and placed a verbal fraud alert tied to my Social Security number. I contacted the county recorder's office and registered a protection flag on my property deed, a step available in West Virginia that prevents any transfer or lien filing without additional identity verification. I took the photographed documents to the county sheriff's financial crimes unit and made a formal report. And then I waited. It took 11 days. The hard money lender that Horace had identified called the sheriff's financial crimes unit on a Thursday morning. They'd been approached with the loan documentation. The investigator on my case had already briefed them. The meeting was allowed to proceed, and when Gilbert and Tessa arrived at the lender's office with the document, there were 2 county detectives waiting. I was not there. I was at home in my kitchen drinking coffee. My phone rang at 10:42 a.m. It was the investigating detective. She told me both had been detained. She told me the document was being processed as evidence. She asked if I was all right. I told her I was fine. I wasn't fine. I sat in my kitchen for a long time after I hung up. The house was very quiet. Out the window, I could see the stairs going up to the garage apartment, the little potted plant by the door that Tessa had put there last spring, a ceramic rooster. I'd always thought it was cheerful. Gilbert called me from the county jail the next morning. I didn't pick up. He called 3 more times over the following week. I didn't pick up. My attorney advised me to wait until I had spoken with the prosecutor's office before making any contact. The charges filed were forgery, attempted fraud, and conspiracy. Tessa was charged as well. Their court dates were set for the fall. I had the locks on the garage apartment changed. I had a local estate sale company come and box up what they'd left behind. Their personal items, clothing, photographs, a few pieces of furniture. I packed into a storage unit and paid the first 3 months. I don't know what I expected to do with that. I think I just wasn't ready to throw away the photographs. The apartment stayed empty for almost 2 months. I didn't go up there much. Once I went up to open the windows and air it out, and I stood in the middle of the small living room looking at the outline on the wall where their TV had been mounted, the little nail holes where they'd hung things. I thought about Gilbert at age 7. The summer he got obsessed with baseball cards, how he'd line them up on his bedroom floor in these very specific formations that only made sense to him. I thought about teaching him to drive in the high school parking lot on a Sunday morning and how he white-knuckled the wheel for 20 minutes and then suddenly relaxed into it, like something clicked. I don't know when I lost him to whatever he became. I don't know if it was gradual or if there was a specific moment I missed. That question is the one I still sit with. He wrote me a letter in September. Handwritten, 3 pages. I know because the envelope sat on my kitchen table for 9 days before I opened it. I'm not going to tell you everything it said. What I will tell you is that he wasn't asking me to drop the charges. He wasn't asking me for anything, actually. He said he knew why I didn't pick up the phone. He said he'd been clean for 6 weeks, that the jail substance program was the first time anyone had made him look at the full picture of what he'd been doing and why. He said he was sorry. Not a performing sorry, just the plain kind, the kind that doesn't ask anything back. I read it twice. Then I folded it and put it in the drawer in my office where I keep things I'm not ready to throw away and not ready to deal with. I'm not ready to see him. I want to be honest about that. I'm not there yet. But I also haven't thrown the letter away. Gilbert pled guilty in October to a reduced charge, 1 count of forgery, 1 count of attempted fraud. His attorney negotiated a sentence that included 18 months in a state facility with mandatory substance treatment, followed by 2 years probation, Tessa received probation and a suspended sentence in exchange for her full cooperation with the prosecution. She moved back to her family in Columbus. I don't expect I'll hear from her again. The garage apartment is rented now to a young couple, both graduate students at the university. They have a cat named Something I can never remember. They are quiet, and they pay on time. And when they see me in the driveway, they wave in that polite way that doesn't ask for anything, which is exactly what I need right now. I've been back to my regular routine. Early mornings, coffee. The financial puzzle books I do at the kitchen table. Tuesdays I have breakfast with my old colleague Horace at the diner on Flemington Road. He always orders the same thing and complains about it every time, which I find oddly comforting. I started going to a support group for parents of adults with addiction. I didn't expect to find that useful, but there's something about sitting in a room with people who are carrying the same particular kind of grief and not having to explain the whole thing from the beginning. You can just say, "My son," and everyone in the room knows what comes after that. The toolbox is still on the workbench in the garage. My father's toolbox, the same one I've had since I was 22. I've thought about moving it, and I've thought about what it would mean if I did. I haven't moved it. Some mornings I go out to the garage for no particular reason, just to have somewhere to stand. I open the toolbox and I take inventory, wrenches by size, tape measure on the left, the red flashlight I've carried since 1987. Everything where it belongs. Nothing hidden underneath. That's enough for now. That has to be enough. If there's one thing 32 years of following money trails taught me, it's that the truth doesn't stay buried. It leaves a record. Every transaction, every document, every choice leaves something behind. A timestamp, a signature, a notary stamp that doesn't quite match the county database. The truth has a way of surfacing whether you're looking for it or not. I was looking for it. I found it. And whatever comes next, whether Gilbert comes out of this and builds something real, or whether the drugs win in the end, or whether we find our way back to something that resembles what we had. I know that I did what I was supposed to do. I didn't look away. I didn't hand over $40,000 that would have gone straight back into the thing that was destroying him. I didn't let the document disappear. I protected what I built. I protected what Donna and I built together. If she were here, I think she would understand why I did it the way I did. She was practical like that. She would have cried first, same as me, and then she would have said, "All right, what do we know? And let's start from there." I still talk to her sometimes, early in the morning, when the house is quiet and the light is coming in through the kitchen window the way it does in spring. I don't know who I think I'm talking to exactly, but it helps to say the things out loud. Gilbert's first probation check-in is in March. He's written twice more since the letter in September. The letters are in the drawer. I haven't written back yet, but I haven't thrown them away either. I think that means something. I'm just not sure what yet. People ask me sometimes, not often, but sometimes, whether I regret the way it ended, whether I should have knocked on that door instead, whether a father who truly loved his son would have handled it differently. I've sat with that question long enough to give it an honest answer. What I know is this: every choice Gilbert made had a consequence that followed it as naturally as water follows a slope. He chose to stop building a real life. He chose the thing that was easier and faster and chemical. He chose to look at his father, a man who opened his home, who said no to protect him, who never once stopped trying to reach him, and decide that I was an obstacle instead of a person. Every one of those choices carried its own weight, and eventually that weight had to land somewhere. It landed where it did, not because I arranged it that way, but because that's how choices work. They don't disappear. They accumulate. The forged document in my toolbox wasn't the beginning of anything. It was the end of a long chain of smaller decisions that Gilbert had been making for years, each one a little further from the man I'd raised him to be. I just happened to be the one who finally saw the chain clearly enough to name it. That's the thing about paying attention. It doesn't feel like a skill when you're doing it. It just feels like being awake. But I've come to believe it's one of the most important things a person can practice. Not suspicion, not cynicism, but genuine, clear-eyed attention to the things in front of you. Gilbert was counting on me not to look too closely. Tessa was counting on the same thing. They had constructed an entire plan around the assumption that I was the kind of man who would miss what was right in front of him. I wasn't that man. 32 years of following financial trails teaches you something about looking past the surface of things. But honestly, it wasn't just the professional training, it was Donna. She used to say that love without attention is just a feeling. It doesn't do anything for anybody. Real love pays attention. It notices the weight a person has lost, the way they look away too fast, the folder of numbers that doesn't add up. Real love doesn't look away because looking hurts. I didn't look away. That's the part I can live with. Gilbert is somewhere in a facility right now, working through something I couldn't work through for him. I hope he makes it. I mean that without reservation. I hope he comes out the other side of this and builds something real, something that's actually his. Not because he owes me anything at this point, but because he deserves to find out who he is when the chemicals aren't making that decision for him. The letters are still in the drawer. 3 of them now. I haven't written back yet, but I think about it more than I used to. And I think the day I write back will be the day I know he's ready to hear something true. Not a lecture, not a list of everything he did wrong. Just the plain truth that I'm still here, and that some things don't expire no matter how long you leave them in a drawer. Integrity isn't complicated when you get down to it. It just means doing what you said you would do, and not doing what you said you wouldn't. Gilbert lost his for a while. I held on to mine. That's not a victory worth celebrating. It's just the minimum a person owes themselves. That toolbox is still on the bench. My father's toolbox. Everything in its place. Some mornings that's enough.